This is the Wealth Ability for CPAs show. Better clients, better practice, better life. Here's Tom Wheelwright.
So running a business is risky, but how about if you could make it risk-free? What if you could actually take charge of things so that you could control things from the inside instead of having to worry about what's going on the outside? Today, we're going to talk to Patrick Esposito, who has just written a book on this, The Structure of Success, to focus on how do we deal with the inside of our firm, the inside of for our clients, the inside of their business. How do we do this in such a way so that we're not so susceptible to external factors like the economy, like inflation, and so forth? And Patrick, it is just great having you on our call today.
Well, Tom, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your listeners.
So tell us, Patrick, just for a second, where did this come from for you? Why did you decide to write this book? What was really the determining factor behind it?
Yeah, so I think to your point, Tom, creating wealth, right? It's what most of us who start small and eventually grow into medium-sized businesses or end up running these types of organizations want to do, right? We want to do it for, our families. We want to do it for our team. We want to do it for ourselves. And I think after spending about 2 decades in, leading or advising a variety of small and medium-sized businesses, some new starts, some publicly traded, the pandemic for a lot of us threw us, for a loop, right? We did not see it coming. And one of the outcomes of that, though, was maybe a little more, while we got through the panic, a little more time to reflect. So as I went through that journey, I spent more time kind of combing through a variety of my own anecdotal notes around what seemed to create the velocity, right, to grow, and what also were the foundations that allowed for stability in small and medium-sized businesses, and decided through that maybe I should test some of those assumptions and theories with a group of experts, right, other folks who had successfully led businesses that were small to medium-sized, to test some of the theories and see if perhaps they were right. And so did a survey with 100, folks deemed to be successes, right, by various measures, everything from, businesses that were under 10 people, but still doing, significant revenue, to businesses that were 250 plus, right, in terms of employees. And what struck me about the survey is that most of the assumptions I had going in, which were you will face headwinds, right, from external forces. But if you have your internal foundations and structures built correctly around a small number of core areas, and in this case, 8, for most businesses, right? Some may be less, some could be more, but 8 seems to about be the common number. You'll have a lot greater chance of success. And if you look at statistical information over what causes failure, it's those same 8 factors, but those 8 factors being out of line as opposed to in line.
All right. Well, you've got me curious now. So let's start with the basic question: is what do you mean by internal focus as opposed to external focus?
Yeah. So, I think we spend a lot of time, right, looking at, macro level economic issues, right? We spend a lot of time looking at micro issues on delivery, right? Whether you're doing services or products, retail, wholesale, industrial, commercial. We spend a lot of time looking up here at the economy, and we spend a lot of time down here looking at customers. And that's all very good. But what I believed, based upon the 100 or so companies I'd been either leading or advising, right? Most advising, few of those leading. There were 8 factors that sort of tended to dictate whether things were going to end up well, right? Or at least be sustained for long periods of time. And those 8 categories were, did you have a governance team that functioned well, right? Did you have a management team that functioned well? Did you have a process to look at adjustment and pivot opportunities and decide when those should be made? Did you have a method and a framework to look at the internal investments that you should be making to support your growth? Did you have a process for managing disputes and potentially even breakups between the owners or owners and investors in a business? Did you have a method for looking, logically, coherently at mergers and acquisitions, other types of transactions and partnerships? And lastly, the two areas that folks don't really like to talk about, right, if they're leading businesses, disaster preparedness and succession planning, right? We tend to shy away from those two more than anything else. And so, when you hear those 8 factors, you probably think, oh yeah, I've seen a situation where I had a business that the management team wasn't all aligned, and it cost us a lot of time and energy and took our focus away from what we should have been doing for our customers and our team. You may say, yeah, we ignored the information that our customers were giving us around the fact that our offerings weren't aligned with what they wanted, right? We needed to make some adjustments. If you look at, and a lot of what I get to in the book, The Structure of Success, is the empirical data that we did from the research that really brings to life the number of other entrepreneurs who've had those same problems with their businesses. And look, we all know that unfortunately most businesses do not succeed, right? But the ones that do succeed seem to have these 8 factors where they look at these areas, make decisions, and do it in a regularized way that they keep their business really aligned and moving forward to create that wealth, right? That your listener base wants to hear about.
Yeah. So one of the first ones you started with was governance.
Yep.
Board, I think that's what you call it, is the governance council or governance board. What do you mean by that? I mean, we all know, I've all heard of advisory boards. But we're talking about small businesses. We're not talking about multinational companies here who have, a board and a chairman of the board, et cetera. We're talking about people, a lot of our listeners, single owner.
Right.
So
right.
What do you mean by a governance board?
Well, to your point, governance is a term that a lot of us who, have small businesses, especially, and even many medium-sized businesses, we tend to shy away from that. We think exactly what you said, which is large-scale corporate, often publicly traded, not for me, right? And some of that is just the image that brings to mind. Some of that is the overhead we think exists if we need to put together board materials. And some of it is maybe not wanting other folks to participate in the decision-making process, right? Either, I as an individual or I with another small group of folks, we own this business. Why do we need other folks to help us? Well, look, to your point around go-it-aloners, right? There's, the whole topic in basketball, right, is this concept of hero ball, right? One individual who puts the team on their back and tries to score a lot of points. Well, look, that doesn't usually work in basketball, right? Even Michael Jordan had, Scottie Pippen and Steve Kerr. And the reality is that doesn't work for most business leaders, right? So when I talk about governance with small and medium-sized business leaders, there tends to be that apprehension around, whoa, what do you mean, right? Like I and this partner own this company, we're going to make the decisions. Well, a great example, I had a friend who I'd known for some time who was leading an energy services company with a partner. And, they were doing great, going through a lot of growth. But what they found was their vision of how their business should sustain and, diversify or focus through that growth, they didn't always agree. And so they had a great idea. And this is actually a lot of what gave me the initial insight that governance is something we need to talk about in small and medium-sized businesses. They came to me and they said, hey, look, we have a great business. We don't want to put together a formal board. What we want is someone in the room with us when we have our board meetings. We're still staying a board of 2. We want you there to advise us, talk things through with us, ask us questions, take a position on what you would do if you had a vote, but we're not giving you a vote. And I thought that was a very great idea, right? So that to me is sort of that middle ground between a formal board of directors who you're actually ceding some of the decision-making authority to and going it alone, right? So that can be.
So you think it could actually be only one person? I mean, it could be just one like coach, advisor, somebody like that you trust, that just gives you a different view of the world.
Exactly. And I have to tell you, look, I didn't come up with that concept on my own. My friends brought it to me and asked me to sit in. And I thought, boy, that's a great idea, because it treads the line between, I want to be the decision maker, the decision maker or the decision makers. I don't want to cede any power up to a board of folks I may not have relationships with who aren't invested in the business. It really puts that center point. So I tend to stack rank this as like formal board of directors, formal board of advisors, informal professional advisory group, friends and family council, or hey, go ahead and play hero ball, keep doing what you're doing, but potentially to your own detriment. So I think, to your point, doesn't have to be a big number, but just having somebody there with you to help you make better decisions, even if they don't have any right to say anything or decide anything, can be really valuable.
I love that. I like having an outside point of view, because that one of the challenges, and of course, we're seeing this in politics right now, right? We're seeing this in social media, that we tend to view the same things and listen to the same things over and over again. So we never get a different perspective. And I know for myself that getting that different perspective is very, very important. So a governance board is one of those things. If you could give us we'll read the book so we can get the update. The book is the Structure of Success. But if you could give us a couple of the others that you think people tend not to do as much, that make a major difference in the organization.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So, when I talked a little bit about succession planning, right? And one of the things I think that, a lot of folks say is, look, I don't intend to hand this business off to my kids, right? I intend to create an exit opportunity. I'm going to wind this thing down. Or, there's another side which says, I want to hand this business off to my kids. Well, look, the reality is there's two levels of succession, right? One is that long-term, long-range scenario where you may be handing it off to someone in the family. You may be handing it off to someone else to lead. There's a whole structure you need to design to figure out who those people are and the training and experience they're going to need to guide that. The other side is the things we don't like to talk about, right? It's the human disaster element, as I like to say, which is, unfortunately, tragic events occur. And, if you are not there the next day, who's going to step in an emergency situation to guide this thing to the point that a long-term scenario or an exit can play out? And so a lot of what, I try to do with folks who lead organizations to say, look, I know you want to talk about it. This business may be as much you as it is anything else. But the reality is we're going to need to look at succession planning in an integrated way, both emergency and long-term, so you can get to whatever that tomorrow is that you want for yourself, for your partners, for your team, for your family, and really even for your customers. And that's another area that I feel like, it requires you almost to do a mental reset around some of the things you think of when you hear the phrase, right? Much like governance. And, one of the other areas that I love to talk about, because I think it's one that gets ignored, is this whole method of having a framework to support disputes between owners and investors, and even business breakups. So, what happens in a lot of organizations I see is you start the company, right? Maybe it's a corporation. You have your articles of organization, but do you have a shareholder agreement? Maybe not. You start an LLC, you have a LLC operating agreement. Does it define what happens in a circumstance where, you have conflict and someone decides they're going to leave as an owner? Is there a right to withdraw? If there is there a valuation process? In both of those types of documents, shareholders agreements, LLC agreements, or, operating agreements, or partnership agreements, if you're a partnership, the more you can write down, the more robust you can make that legal document that you hang your hat on, the easier it's going to be when things do get rough, right? Because, even the best partnerships sometimes can hit rough waters. Sometimes you need to figure out how to make decisions when it's two people and you need to break a tie, right? And sometimes you need to make a decision around what's the right way to value an exit. And in some cases, what's the right way to fund an exit. So, those are three of the areas that I think are to me, some of the ones that most folks don't address in their businesses, but will allow them to be more resilient and succeed over a longer term. And obviously there's the other five as well. Because I think when you ask anybody who's run a business, the biggest mistakes they've made, the number one thing they go to is management team. And a lot of that comes down to, an individual who's a leader trying to wear too many hats, too much groupthink, right? We tend to look for people who are like us.
Right.
We should be looking for diversity of views and opinions. But those are a lot of the conversations that I have when I'm helping advise others, and a lot of the conversations that frankly I even have with myself when I'm leading an organization, right?
So speaking of that, so let's then turn back, because this takes us back to that governance board. When you're looking for that person, and honestly, I've been through this before where the governance board actually has failed, because I had somebody on that governance board that was a can't do person, not how can I do what I want to do person. And that's a big difference. So how do you go about choosing that person or persons to be on that board?
Yeah. Well, look, to your point, right? There's the model and then there's the composition, right? And being able to determine both what the elements are that you need from a composition standpoint for the board, right? What are the experience sets? What are the viewpoints? What are the levels of expertise that you need? That's part of it. And then also having both the framework and the model to say, look, this isn't working. We're going to need to, have a resignation, or we're going to need to remove this person, and we're going to need to readdress it. And I think for most individuals who lead businesses, we generally are not great at everything, right? For me personally, my biggest flaw is I'm not the world's best salesperson, right? And a lot of folks who are entrepreneurs are great salespeople, but maybe they're not as great on, compliance and accounting or something like that. So what I always tend to tell folks is, look at yourself and do an inventory of your real skills and talents. And then what are the areas where you're not as strong and you need help? And then go out and try to find people who can fill those roles with the expertise that you need to really supplement yourself. And, in the case of my first company that I started, we had a great team, but what we did not have was anybody who had experience really with selling software, anybody who had experience with leading a venture-backed software company that was, in large measure family owned, to a logical exit based upon the market trajectory to make sure the team and technologies were able to, lift off. So we found somebody, fortunately through our investors, who was an independent board member who helped to bring that experience set, and could be there not just to guide us in board meetings, but in informal conversations when we really needed to understand how to set up an OEM arrangement so it wasn't something that would undermine the value of the company, right?
So I jokingly say that CPA stands for cheapest people in America. So you're looking at an outside person.
Right.
If you were looking at an outside director, they would expect compensation. So kind of how do you deal with that part of it? Because I know, we are concerned about costs. That is kind of part of our job, is to be concerned about costs as CPAs. How do you deal with that? Because you can find a friend and they'll do it, but are they really outside? That's part, because you want somebody who will tell you the hard truth, right? Not just somebody who will say, show up at a meeting once a month. So what do you do about that from a compensation or that kind of an agreement?
Yeah. So to your point, as I've seen scenarios like this, I've seen a range, right? So there's, some folks who in their business, to your point, they're cost sensitive, but they're cost sensitive around equity, not as cost sensitive around cash. Others may be less cost sensitive around equity and very cost sensitive around cash. So some type of nominal equity position, either in the form of, stock options or restricted stock or, restricted units in an LLC. I see that. I see cash. I also see success-based scenarios, right? So if the goal is to, you realize a market is moving and you want to make sure that what you've built stays as a part of it rather than gets killed during that process, it could be something that's based upon revenue growth. It could be something that's based upon exits. So, there's a lot of ways to do it. And really, to your point, it comes down to what is your appetite to spend? What are you willing to spend, both in cash and equity? And what are you and the individuals you're looking to involve willing to sort of, put a bet and say, well, we're going to do this based upon the success of where we're trying to drive this.
Yeah, I actually love the success compensation idea, because what it's saying is that, look, here's our benchmark. Here's where we are. If you can help us be better, why wouldn't we share that with you? And it does tell your advisor, whoever's coming in, that, hey, this is a serious position. So I do like that. So again, the book is The Structure of Success, and I believe your website is patrickesposito.com, right?
Right. Yep.
Any final words, any final recommendations for our CPAs?
I think one, grateful for the opportunity, Tom, to talk with you and your listener base. Two, would invite folks, as you said, to check out the book, available on most of your online retailers as well as many bookstores. As Tom said, you can check out my author website, patrickesposito.com, or my other business sites that help both through Initiative Labs and Acme General Corp to advise small and medium-sized businesses, and even other organizations, government agencies, nonprofits, public companies through those ventures.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. And just remember, when we're looking at, when we structure our own company for success, we have to be strong internally before we can help our clients. And after all, it is about our clients. When we can serve our clients better, our firm becomes better, our life becomes better, and I think, my opinion, the world becomes better. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to the Wealthability for CPAs show. Better clients, better practice, better life. To learn more, go to wealthability.com.